Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Bagby. I'm the owner of Watermark Books and Cafe in Wichita, Kansas. Welcome to this virtual event that we've been looking forward to for months. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping. Feel free to put something in the chat. We will also have links to book purchases in the chat. So we have signed John Grisham books, and we have wonderful book plates for James Lee Burke. And I just want to thank you for joining us. And I hope you will insert your questions. And I'm looking forward to this wonderful conversation. So before we begin, I just want to welcome both of these novelists. And they must have started writing when they were about 12, because the number of books in their library is amazing. And I don't mean library, I mean that they've written. So I want to introduce first John Grisham. He is the author of 36 novels, one nonfiction book, and 5 short story collections, and 7 Theodore Boone young reader books. His new book is called Sully. It is about Samuel Suleiman, who gets the chance to come to the United States from his native Sudan to play basketball. And when complications get in his way from returning home, he has to make some decisions. And this is a really amazing book about resiliency and making decisions in a place where one never would have thought they would have been. And it's remarkable. John Grisham has drawn on his passion for basketball. There's the author photo.
Yeah, what a picture.
We love. And so we're glad he's here this evening. He has a new book coming out this fall, and it will be in the chat too as well. So feel free to pre-order if you'd like. And I really am so delighted to be able to introduce my friend James Lee Burke. I've known him for a long time. I've known his family. I've met their boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and kids and Pearl, and I just think they're remarkable. And it is my great pleasure to introduce you to him this evening. This is his new novel.
Sarah.
What?
I say thank you, Sarah.
Oh,
Thank you.
Another Kind of Eden is in the Holland family series. Burke has written 39 novels, 2 collections of short stories. He's won 2 Edgar Awards. And this one is the 12th installment in the Holland family novels. I want to say that in you will find in this book, as well as all the other ones, the rich landscapes that you are transported to. You feel the grit, you feel the rocks, you feel the soft places, and the characters who in Burke's hands decisions become biblical, and they're called on to really make some moral decisions that sometimes are right and sometimes are wrong. And then obviously the wonderful plots that keep you turning the pages. And so everything you ever expect and more is in Another Kind of Eden. I hope that you will give them all a warm virtual welcome. And I'm going to turn this over to John.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
It's
you,
always
Sarah.
nice to be at Watermark and in Wichita. Jim and I were together last year. It locked down in quarantine, still promoting books. The Private Cathedral was his 23rd or 22nd Dave Robichaud novel. We did that last year, and it's always a pleasure to be here. It's always nice to be with one of my favorite writers, James Lee Burke. I think probably I worry right now he may be in some trouble. because evidently Pearl is angry with James because for dinner he's having Ritz crackers and a Sprite as we
Yeah.
talk. He brought his dinner with him to the virtual event, and that's what he's having as we. There you go. I'm sorry, the Qua lime flavored water and Ritz crackers. It's not a bad dinner, but always fun to be with James Lee Burke and one of my favorite writers. I read in 1989, my first novel was published, A Time to Kill, and that was the year I read Black Cherry Blues, my first Robichaux novel, and I've read so many of them since, Cadillac Jukebox and Confederate Dead, and there's no way to name them all. But he's back this year, back now with a book called A New Kind of Eden about the Holland family. So, Jim, good seeing you again, and let's start talking as you have dinner.
Well, same here. Thank you for the nice things you said.
I gotta ask you a question right off the bat. You've got mainly two series, the Holland family saga, Hackberry Holland, Billy Bob Holland, those novels, and then Robichaux. This is another book, Another Kind of Eden from the Holland family. And our hero is Erin Broussard Holland. And after 10 or 12 of these books about the Hollands, tell us who these people are, where they came from, and might they be some of your kinfolks?
Well, that's correct. My family, my mother's family, were descended from the Hollands, and my grandmother was Alifair Holland, and that's where our daughter Alifair gets her name. They were people who settled in Texas in the 1850s or so, but they were remarkable people. They were certainly not singular in that respect, but the patriarch was a man named Sam Morgan Holland, and he was a drover. He was cattleman, take 2,000 head at a time from San Antonio up to Wichita. But he also had a penchant for drinking and shooting people. He killed 9 men in gun duels. He was doing Reconstruction. And he was a former Confederate soldier, but he became a saddle preacher. He rode the same just Chisholm Trail, retrieving some of the poor souls that he probably offended in his earlier years. But anyway, I have used them, and with, of course, some great latitude. But the story is about the American West, and the story of the American West is really the story of man. And so I've tried to make these books, I think you said there were 12. I'm trying to make them epic, and I don't know to what degree I've succeeded, but I think my best work is about the Hollands.
So get to this story, and our hero, our protagonist is Erin Broussard Holland, who it takes place in 1962 in the small town of Trinidad, Colorado. He's what, late 20s, something like that? Correct. I'm not sure I ever saw his exact age. We last saw him in 1952 as a character. He was in Houston. I forget the title of the book, but that book came out 5 years ago. So now he's in his late 20s. He's war wounded and war scarred from Korea. He's an aspiring novelist who has yet to find success. He can't say he's a drifter, but he loves to ride the rails. And he jumps off a train in Colorado and finds his way to the small town of Trinidad, which is near the border of New Mexico. And tell us a bit about Erin. What's his background, and what's he doing riding trains for a living?
Well, this book is one of 3 narrated by Erin Holland Broussard. The book you mentioned, about 1952, story of what was going on in 1952, is titled The Jealous Kind. And it's one of three books that I think of as my best books. The other two are the Rising, gee whiz, House of the Rising Sun, and the other is Wayfaring Stranger. And this story is deliberately placed in the year 1962. I meant to write a story about migrant farm workers, and I ended up, though, with something quite different. My perception is that the era in which we live now, and that's the story of this book, the portal is 1962. It was the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the beginnings of the drug culture, our role as a neo-colonial power. All those things were occurring at that time simultaneously. And so this book, I think, is emblematic with about many of the problems we have today. We don't see them as being sequential. I mean, all this conversation the last 2 days about it's a tragedy what's going on in Afghanistan. That was a done deal 20 years ago, that the United States had put itself in a bear trap. And that terrible decision, the same one that T.E. Lawrence talked about in 1915, is going to haunt us for a long time. Anyway, I didn't mean to proselytize, but the story is about also the class war, the war between the corporations and unions. It has many themes, but it's actually not a very big book, but I don't think it's a dull one, certainly.
You're never dull, Jim. You've written 40 some odd books, so have I. And I'm often asked, what's my favorite? You said this is one of your three best books. How are you able to rank them? I can't do that. I can't go back, and I don't want to go back and reconsider all the books I've written and try to say, okay, this is the best, this is the worst. I'm not able to do that. I get so close to the stories when I write them, and that when I'm finished with them, I'm really finished with them. I don't want to go back and read. I've never gone back to read one. I don't want to. I guess I'm moving on so fast to the next one. I'm thinking about that, but I've never been able to. I've been asked before, what are your top? What are the three best books you've ever written? And I can't do that. How are you able to say that?
Well, the one criterion that I use is what is it that others have not done in these books? Mm. And those three books are the books that I don't believe have peers. I don't mean in terms of quality. It's subject matter and experiment. I do not know anyone who has written a book like Wayfaring Stranger. I don't believe that anyone has written one like The Jealous Kind or The House of the Rising Sun. They're dramatically different than I've ever seen American history treated. That's my perception. I mean, that might be a little narcissistic, but I didn't say it was necessarily good. I said it was different.
But your most popular books are by far the Robichaux books, right?
Oh yeah. If it were not for the Dave Robichaux books, I'd have a morning paper out for sure.
So the last time we talked, we were talking about the Private Cathedral. That was book number, I don't know, 22 or 23 in the series. Is 22. It coming back soon? Is it coming back soon?
Well, I'd say never say never, but I've just written another book narrated by Erin Holland Broussard. So I don't know what is next. I think there's still a lot to be said about the 1950s. The 2 decades in our country's history that for which we have the most nostalgia are the 1950s and the 1920s. Those are actually joined at the hip. And it's because of, I think, the conflict, the cultural conflict, but also American art that comes from the bottom up, like jazz, for example. The civil rights movement, a kind of innocence that Americans are guilty of, or in effect, we celebrate youth and vitality. And think of it this way: what is the state that is most creative? Always, it's California. For good or bad, every new idea and trend in the country comes from California. But it's like turning the sun around. I was a student of Dr. John Neihart, who wrote Black Elk Speaks. He was a mystic, but I'll never forget something he told me. I was 21 years old, and I was in his poetry writing class at the University of Missouri. He was he was a friend of Buffalo Bill Cody. This man had led an extraordinary life, but I'll never forget what he said to me. One of my first stories was written about the American West. He said, "Jim, don't ever give it up. The American West is the story of mankind. It's not an American story. Man has always followed the sun. Civilization has followed the sun." And he said, actually, the story of the American West is the story of the human race. But California has inverted everything. It is the place where madness actually becomes poetry. Think of it this way. You ever been in the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles? It's just the perfect symbol for California. All right, who is there? Everybody. It's the place that gave us Charlie Manson. But for good or bad, the Hells Angels, Richard Nixon. You can go on and on. Hollywood. People love to denigrate Hollywood. This is the only country in the world that elects Hollywood actors not only as senators, but as American presidents. That it's an open air mental asylum. You can't beat California. I love California, but it's never dull. Anyway, but I always think of the Holland books as the books that at least I tried to say something about the American experience. We are still the model of democracy in the world. We are the symbol. Every country in the world, countries that we fear, places that are about the size of a postage stamp, we fear for some reason I cannot explain, but they all want to come here. And I think that's a great thing to be happy for. But anyway, I'm going to say things I don't really want to say in political things, but I fear for my children and grandchildren. I fear we're in a bad time. I grew up, as you did, in the American South, and Huey Long was very real. He's the prototype, you know, and George Wallace and John and McCarthy. These are scary guys, and I think they have had a rebirth.
Yeah. Let's work our way back to the current novel that we're trying to promote here and sell copies of. Okay, another kind of Eden. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the story. So Erin lands in Trinidad, Colorado, and he gets a job working for a decent farmer, Jude Lowry, I think. And before long, he meets a girl, a beautiful waitress at a diner. She's also an artist, and they kind of want to get together, and they're kind of afraid of each other. And then the trouble starts, and the trouble is labor-related trouble. You tell, this is what I enjoyed doing with fiction. So sometimes you can work in a real piece of history, something that's nonfiction, something that a lot of folks probably don't know about and wouldn't know about it if were it not for popular fiction. You can tell a true story, and you do this with the Ludlow Massacre, which happened in 1914 and was a real watershed for the labor movement in this country. True story. I'd never heard it before. And I read it in the book, and I went and did some research and was fascinated by it. Why? Tell me how that true story found its way in your novel.
Well, as you indicated, very few people are aware of what occurred in 1914 at Ludlow, Colorado. I had never heard of it until we moved to Colorado in 1962. Not in high school was it taught, or in college or graduate school. And Woody Guthrie wrote about it, but nobody else. The coal miners went on strike, and the strike breakers raided the camp. They were in a tent camp, the strikers were. And these guys, these strike breakers, were the Colorado State Police or militia, but they were officially there in uniform. And John Rockefeller's goons, and they killed a lot of people, including, I think, 11 people who smothered to death in a cellar. Smoke killed them. The fire was built on top of the cellar. And that cellar was still there when we moved close by. And I went to see it, and there was no monument of any kind. There was a door, a big, huge door. It's horizontal there, lying embedded above where these children and women died in the flames. And you could open it up and walk down the stairs. And I still believe in the perception I had at the time. That's a haunted place. My skin was, it was like it's 30 degrees below zero. I felt that cold. My wife felt it the same way. And I began to become interested in that history. Now, this is what occurred as a consequence. That John Rockefeller became the most hated man in America. And of course, his people decided to change the image. And so that's when his philanthropy began. And right south of Trinidad, going down Raton Pass, is a stucco church. It's in ruins. And it looks like it's 300 years old. It's not. It was built 3 years after the massacre by John Rockefeller. He started building churches around the country. Anyway, some years later, I put all of what I just said a minute ago in my book, Cimarron Roads. And 2 years later, a monument was built by the place where those people died. It was built by the state of Colorado. And I always want to believe that maybe my book had an influence. I don't know that that's true. But that story, it goes back into history, certainly. I mean, it's a long time ago. But the same forces are at work. And it has to do with our immigration. Look, this is not a political book, though. It's a great love story, but it's also a story about the supernatural, and it reaches way back into Salem, Massachusetts, the year 1692, the year of the witch hunt and the hangings. And the Puritans were a remarkable people, but they had a dark streak in them, and it's still with us. This is still a Puritan country.
Let's talk about the romance. That's more fun, okay?
Okay.
Talk about Erin and Joan, right? The waitress.
Yeah.
They had an unusual courtship.
Yeah. Well, she's just 19 years old and an orphan girl who works as a waitress in a Mexican restaurant, but she has an extraordinary talent, and she feels a spiritual bond with the victims of the massacre. And she paints these canvases with the images of the children trapped inside the flames. It's almost an obsession with her, but it's because she feels that until their story is told to others, those children will never escape the fire. And she has an affair with this old lecherous academic who teaches in the local JUCO. And at the meantime, our protagonist, Erin, Holland Broussard, has fallen, just dropped dead in love with her. He said, that's the one. It's that moment. That's the one. And he's a
I kind of
very
like her
eccentric.
too. I could fall in love with her. I like her too.
Yeah, she's a great character. She's heck on wheels.
And so you got to have your bad guys. You got your romance. You've got your setting beautifully set in the mountains and deserts of Colorado. You've got the history. You've got the girl. You've got the protagonist. You've got the lecherous professor you mentioned and his school bus full of druggies. It reminded me of Charles Manson, the way they moved around and did bad things. So who are the bad guys? You always have great bad guys. So describe what Reuben and his family. They actually attacked Erin early in the book, beat him severely, and then were out to get him. Right?
Well, that's the Vickers family, yeah, and they're really bad guys, and as you say, and they're very powerful, and they are the people who are out to break the back of the United Farm Workers Union. And that's part of the story too, because of course, Cesar Chavez was beginning to have a very strong influence on the agribusiness. And I think of some of the best scenes I've written describing Latino life are in that book. There's a moment when Erin is at a Catholic church, it's a huge meeting of poor migrant workers, and he suddenly has this epiphany, and he said he actually sees in the candle flame the light. These people, hundreds of them, are holding candles. He said it's like looking into the face of Jesus's original followers, that these are the people that Jesus hung out with. He didn't hang out with the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I won't go any further. We're not going to give away the ending. It's typical of you. It's suspenseful and at times confusing and just a whole lot of fun to read. You said your next book also has Erin as the narrator?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's the setting there?
It's set in Montana. It's contemporaneous with the pandemic. The problems with our pandemic culture. He's 85 or 86 when he narrates this story, and the story is a frightening one on many levels. It deals with the loss of his daughter, but also it deals with the fission that he sees taking place in his country. And the main story, though, is about the massacre of the Nez Perce Indians on the Big Hole River and the massacre of the Blackfeet Indians on the Marias River in 1872. And it's about, in effect, the influences of Manifest Destiny. But again, it doesn't seek to proselytize. I know I say a lot of things politically, but I never write about them, not directly. I actually do not believe politics exists. They're just an extension of what people are. Freud got it right. It had to do with toilet training many years in people's past. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. See a guy with his hands always squeezed and angry? the story. We won't go into it, but the politics is anyway, and plus it's boring. It's pretty boring stuff. But this is
So
not
let's
political.
let's stay away from politics and talk about something else.
Okay.
You're writing the book now. Pe- People are fans, readers, aspiring writers are always curious, even fascinated with how we do what we do, how we work, how we structure our days or nights or whatever to write almost every day. We're lucky enough to be able to write for a living. How do you do it? What is your process, your schedule, your goal every day?
Well, I write every day. I always have. I mean, if I could, I'm fortunate today that I'm able to devote myself completely to writing. I start in the morning and early, and I try to get 750 words, and I don't really quit until about 11 at night. I do some other things in between, but I really don't fold up till about 11 at night. I keep a book, notebook by my bed. I have a night lamp, and I write sometimes in the middle of the night. And in the morning, I rewrite what I wrote the previous day and then try to get another 750 words. And I take no days off, not for any reason, never, unless I absolutely have to. And if I do it that way, I could produce a one book a year. But it's, as I say, I'm fortunate. The people who can get up and work early in the morning and then do a day job and then come home and write again, they're the heroes. So it's, I remember, pardon, go ahead.
I never could do it. I was never able to, when I started writing, I was 30 years old, 1985. And I realized that, and I was a busy lawyer in a law office that made no money, but I had a lot of clients in my hometown. And so, life was busy. And the only time I could possibly write was early in the morning. And I would get up at 5 and go to the office and write for an hour or two. And I did that for 5 years and wrote the first 2 books. But after that, I never could go back that day and write again. Even today, I'll write from about 7 until about 11 or 12, and I walk out. I can't wait to get there in the morning because I love those early morning hours. To me, that they're the most creative because you're rested and your mind is sharp and the words flow easier. But that only lasts for a few hours, and when I'm done, I'm done. I leave the farm and go to town, and I rarely go back in the afternoon unless I'm really behind. Staring at a deadline, and I never write at night. I just can't. I can't recall any time in the last 35 years where I've got up in the middle of the night and to go write something down. I get away from it, and because of that, I'm able to start at 7 o'clock with a whole lot of energy and creative juices. So sort of similar, but I can't go back in the day. I get enough of it before noon. And so your pace is 750 a day, and that's a book a year, roughly a book a year.
Yeah, that's about it. That's it.
All right. Tough question. Tough question, Mr. Burke. You're 85 years old?
84.
I'm sorry, 84. All right. Do you see yourself slowing down anytime soon?
Well, I never dwell on it. There's an expression: if you want to make God smile, tell him your plans. But I want to apologize about denigrating the study of politics. Anyway, I'm the one who has the problem with politics. So it's a fine study to pursue.
Yeah, you keep going back to it. You say you don't want to talk about it, but you keep going back to politics. So,
Yeah,
listen,
that's,
I'm
that's
very,
a problem.
I'm very political myself. I have a background in politics, and I learned a long time ago that when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, you cannot assume that your readers share your politics or your religion, and it's best to stay away from it. Both
Yeah.
of them, and I do that for the most part. But when you write about the things I write about, like criminal injustice and the death penalty and wrongful
Yeah.
convictions, it's pretty clear which side of the street I'm on. But that's just part of the process. So it's always best to stay away from politics and popular fiction. I think if you want to write essays in magazines and things like that, then have at it. But it's just not.
Yeah.
I don't want to burden my readers with my politics, so I try to stay away. I see
No,
Sarah's back.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah, especially since, Jim, you think they're boring. It's really good to stay away from them when you're fiction. I love that. Well, so first I want to ask John a question because you just touched on it a little bit. We were talking about politics and current events and things, but was it, somebody wants to know if it's Time for Mercy, was it as a response to George Floyd's murder?
Oh no, I had written most of that book by the time George Floyd was murdered. That was back early summer of last year, and by then I was almost finished with the Time for Mercy by that time. I'm not that quick on current events. Sometimes I get more credit than I deserve for being on top of current events, but that was not a reaction to that.
Right. Just a kind of an underlying issue there.
Right.
So this is a comment for Jim. A woman who's on here, or man, I don't know what, someone who lives in Texas mentions that she appreciated you mentioning someone hanging a flag without observing protocol, the proper protocol. And that was healing to her, that somebody in Texas was being disrespectful to the flag. I'm just passing that on. And then someone also wants to know, okay, co-authors, what if, here's an idea and the themes and everything you need to co-author a book. You have Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and the oil field connections within those. You have the clash of cultures between big banks and business, and soiling the land, and all the characters that live there. What do you think?
Well, that's the aggregate. That's it. It's the in the conflict often between people's value systems and the jobs that allow them to have a livelihood. And I get sometimes, not very often, years ago more so, criticism of letters, whatever, about my attitude toward the oil business. And I always try to explain to people, number one, I was a landman for the Sinclair Oil Company. That's how I went to college. I also was a pipeliner, and I was I worked on the ocean on the drilling rig. And also, my mother worked 40 years for an oil company, and my father was a natural gas engineer. I mean, I'm the wrong person. My family are the wrong people to consider critics of the oil business. Here is the difference. The oil business is not run by oil people. It's run by people who own other things as well. But this is what it comes down to. The issue is the spigot, not the drill in the ground. Everybody in the oil business knows it. The power in the oil business is the ability to cut it off or to turn it on arbitrarily. It's that simple. Ask anybody. and they'll smile when they say it, because when they're smiling, they're saying, haven't you figured it? Hey, how about this one? Did you ever see the film The Formula with Marlon Brando? Nobody has seen it because it was a terrible film, but there's a great moment in there. Brando plays the role of this obnoxious oil man, and his friend JW says, I was thinking there, Jimmy Bob, that these damn Arabs has sure been causing us a lot of trouble. And the Marlon character says, JW, haven't you figured it out yet? We are the damn Arabs. That's it.
Okay, well,
Ask anybody in the oil business. Excuse me.
There was a clarification here that everybody flies flags in Texas, but she's not sure that nobody's sure if they understand what the flag really stands for. Okay. Okay, this is for John. I wondered if Sully was a play on words for WPS from LR. I am a loyal Hog fan. Do you still follow them?
Do I follow the Hogs?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, my first 10 years were in Arkansas, and we were rabid Arkansas Razorback fans. And then we moved next door in Mississippi. That's where I grew up. And over time, I lost my love of the Razorbacks. I went to Mississippi State and Ole Miss in college, and both of those are big rivals of Arkansas in the all-powerful SEC West football division. Now, having said that, I don't miss many games on television. When there's a big SEC game, that's my favorite football to watch, is SEC football, especially from the Western Division. I got a question for Jim. Jim, you sent me the advanced reading copy of your book a couple of months ago. There was an envelope in the book, and in the envelope, you sent me a guitar pick. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and the pick is from, it says James Lee Burke, The Lost Get Back Boogie. Okay, an old book of yours. So what's the story behind these guitar picks?
Oh, they were just gifts to people. Erin Mitchell, who works with me and is just a wonderful person as well as publicist. She said, Jim, why not just send out some some guitar picks, and there are a lot of country music fans who read my book, and that's a fact. It's just I feel a great pride in that. A lot of people in Nashville read my books, and every signing I did there was a big hit, really a big hit. I even competed with the Vanderbilt UT game. I had as many people lined up outside my book signing, almost as not quite, about 50,000 shy, but we had a big crowd in spite of the homecoming game. John, I got to tell you, I don't know if I talked to you about this before. You're talking about moments where politics are maybe can be extrapolated, but they do not affect the drama of the play, the script, or the book. And that is in the chamber. One of the most effective moments I have ever seen on the nature of capital punishment is in that moment when, is it Bill belongs to Gene Hackman played the role. He was the Klansman who was about to be executed, and he is sitting in the death cell, and the warden comes in and says, well, Bill, it looks like it's time. Do you want to say anything? And the response is, as I recall, yes, sir, I do. In my lifetime, I hated many a man, but the one I hated the most is myself. That should have gotten a Pulitzer Prize. It says it all. He was taught his whole life to hate the black man so he didn't have to hate himself. It's just, there it is. There's nothing complex about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a great
thank you.
scene. Good heavens.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman gave me a blurb once.
He refused one from me. What was your blurb about?
Really? I forget which one he gave me, but he did. It was in an interview. And
Gene was
Bill
in 3 of my
Clinton
movies. Gene was in The
3.
Firm. He was Tom Cruise's senior partner in The Firm. He was Sam
right.
Cahall, the old Klansman on death row in the chamber, and he was in a book called The Runaway Jury, and I cannot remember the character's name because that was 30 books ago or more than that. So I can't. These names get confusing after a while. But Gene was in 3 of my books and adaptations and did a wonderful job. He's a wonderful actor.
Yeah.
Okay, I have 2 more questions actually for Jim. Where is Cleat for sale right now in your mind? And I think you kind of spoke to the fact that how you feel about whether or not there will be a Robichaux book. No commitment on your part. But where is Cleat in your mind? Is he resolved any issues or?
Well, that's an interesting question because I believe the characters exist in the unconscious. They're always there. I don't know where they come from exactly, but I know they do reside in the unconscious. And I subscribe to Sigmund Freud again. He believed the conduit into the unconscious, which only the artist possesses, is a form of neurosis. Now, neurosis is a bad term to use, but look, it never fails you. And it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Someone once asked Hemingway, do you ever see psychiatrists, Mr. Hemingway? He said, oh yes, every day, Dr. Smith Corona.
Okay, and the other one that we'll close out with is, how did you decide what would be the first sentence of the novel? And what was that? What went through your experience?
It comes in my dreams. And Milton talked about his blindness. And in fact, he wrote a poem on it. And he said that each morning he woke to darkness. And it was during the hours of sleep that he had illumination in his life. And I always remembered that. But that's why I keep a notebook. And I wake up about 4. No, not about 4. It's 4 o'clock every morning. I wake up at 4 and I see 2 scenes ahead. And I've never, though, understood the process. I never outline. I don't have any idea where it's going. But the first line of the book is the most beautiful line. It's always waiting there. It's right there. And then it's funny, when you get to the end of a book and you look back through it, it all is there. It was always there. And that's why I've always felt, my father used to say that science and art are nothing more than the incremental discovery of what God has already created. One sentence. How about that?
There it is. There it is. We're finished. No. Thank you both so much. Again, another kind of Eden. It's so good. It's such an accomplishment. It stays with you forever. And you might be tempted to just start over again when you finish to make sure you didn't miss anything. And Suli, this is a departure from the mystery novels, but I'm telling you, you don't want to miss this either, especially anybody who plays basketball, and it's a great book for young athletes. I love it, love it, love it. And
Thank
you
you.
just don't want to miss this. Up close.
The
and
author
personal.
photo.
The author photo going after the ball. And both of you, I cannot wait to read the new Holland novel, Erin.
Well,
And I know that some of it must be based on a lot of your experience, because this last year wasn't so great for you, James. And John, we look forward to selling your new book as well. So thank you so much. And thank everyone who took the time to join us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your support. Again, I'm Sarah Bagby from Watermark Books in Wichita, Kansas, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for the guitar
Sarah.
pick. I'm gonna keep it forever, okay? I got my guitar pick. Farewell. I'll see you down the road, okay?
all right. Thank you, Madison, also.
And thanks, Madison.
John. Yeah.